She thought she was just helping a hungry man. But 2 days later, the truth hit like a freight train. He wasn't the criminal the police were after. The real suspect was caught, but it was too late. Now, an innocent man is sitting behind bars, and Emma is about to risk everything to set things right. Emma had seen all kinds of people walk through the doors of Joe's diner. Truckers running on caffeine and desperation, single moms wrangling screaming toddlers, old veterans who carried more stories than they had teeth. It wasn't a fancy place. The neon sign outside flickered like it was too tired to keep up, and the laminated menus were one coffee spill away from disintegration. But it was home. She'd been slinging plates of greasy hash browns and bottomless coffee refills for 5 years now. Long enough to know which customers tipped well, which ones would sit there for hours nursing a single cup, and which ones, her personal favorites, told the kind of life stories that made her want to pull up a chair and just listen. And then there were the ghosts, the ones who drifted in, hollow-eyed, with nothing but exhaustion and a handful of crumpled dollar bills. That night, one of them walked in. The bell above the door gave a half-hearted jingle, barely registering over the distant hum of a Johnny Cash song playing on the jukebox. Emma glanced up from wiping down the counter. The man looked like a wreck. His coat, if you could still call it that, hung off his shoulders like it was ashamed to be seen with him. His hair was a tangled mess, dark and unkempt, and his face had the kind of tired that no amount of sleep could fix. He moved like the weight of the world had settled onto his back and refused to budge. Emma had seen people like him before. Maybe they were just passing through. Maybe they had nowhere else to go. Either way, she knew the look. Hungry, but too proud to ask. The guy dropped onto a stool at the counter without even glancing at the menu. Coffee and water. His voice was rough, like he hadn't spoken to another human in days. Emma didn't need to ask if he wanted food. If he could afford it, he'd have ordered it. She didn't make a big deal out of it. No pity, no questions. Just walked over to the register, punched in an order under her own tab, and slid a burger and fries onto a tray. Set it down in front of him like it was nothing. "It's on the house." She kept her tone light, casual. The man hesitated. His fingers twitched, like he wasn't sure if he should take it. He looked up at her, eyes shadowed with something she couldn't quite place. Distrust? Shame? And then, just for a second, something else. Gratitude. "Thank you." His voice cracked on the words. Emma just shrugged, already moving to the next customer. It wasn't a big deal. She wasn't some hero, just another waitress pulling another long shift in a city that didn't care whether you made it or not. If she'd known what was coming, though, she might have thought twice. The next morning, Emma pushed open the diner's door with one hand, a steaming cup of gas station coffee clutched in the other. She wasn't awake yet, not really. Her shift started in 10 minutes, and all she wanted was to pour herself into autopilot mode, flip on the coffee machine, and get through the breakfast rush without thinking too hard. No such luck. Across the counter, Betty was a mess. The woman, who had been working here longer than Emma had been alive, was hunched over her phone, scrolling like her life depended on it. Her face was pale, mouth slightly open. She didn't even look up when Emma walked in. Weird. Emma took a sip of her coffee and raised an eyebrow. "Everything good, or did we finally make it onto one of those top 10 worst diners in Philly lists?" Betty didn't laugh, didn't even react. Instead, she snapped her head up so fast, Emma almost spilled her drink. "Did you see this?" Betty's voice was a little shaky. Emma frowned. "See what?" Without a word, Betty flipped her phone around. The screen lit up with a breaking news article. Bold red letters screaming across the top. "Police searching for fugitive armed and dangerous." And then the picture. Emma's stomach dropped. She knew that face, knew those eyes, knew that damn coat, the man from last night, the one she had fed. The coffee cup in her hand suddenly felt too heavy. "Oh, no." The words barely made it past her lips. Betty was still staring at her, waiting for a reaction. Emma couldn't breathe. Her brain wasn't working right. What if he had been dangerous? What if he had a weapon? What if he... No, he hadn't done anything. He had just sat there, eaten the food, and left. Right? But the question that really made her skin crawl wasn't whether he had been dangerous last night. It was whether he was still somewhere nearby. The tension inside Joe's diner had been simmering all day, thick as the grease on the grill. People came in talking about him, the fugitive, the dangerous man on the run. They whispered over their pancakes, shot nervous glances at the door, checked their phones like they were expecting the guy to burst in at any moment. Emma had tried to keep her head down, pretend she was too busy refilling coffee cups to care. But the truth? She wasn't okay. Every time the bell above the door jingled, her heart slammed against her ribs. Every time a new customer walked in, she caught herself scanning their face, searching for him. By evening, the nerves had settled into something worse, something inevitable, like the air before a storm. And then, the door opened. Emma didn't even need to look. She felt it, the shift in the room, the way conversation died mid-sentence, the way the air tightened like a noose. She lifted her eyes. Him, standing in the doorway, just like last night. Only this time, he wasn't shivering, wasn't hunched over like a man with nowhere to go. He was looking right at her and walking straight to the counter. Emma's hands locked around a coffee pot. Betty, standing just behind her, had already reached under the counter, fingers curling around her phone. Emma swallowed. Her throat was dry. Too dry. You okay?" she forced out, her voice quieter than she meant. The man didn't sit, didn't order. He just leaned in, his voice low and rough. "I didn't do it." Emma froze. "They're looking for the wrong guy." His breath was uneven, not wild, not angry, just desperate. Her heart slammed against her ribs. "Can you prove it?" she whispered. The man licked his lips, glancing toward the door. His fingers twitched like he was counting seconds. "No," Emma's pulse spiked. "But if you help me..." Bam! The door exploded open. The diner filled with flashing red and blue light. Cops, guns drawn, hands in the air. Emma saw it before it even happened. The look in his eyes, the panic, the moment he realized this was the end. 2 days later, the news dropped like a bomb. Man arrested in diner, case was not the fugitive. Real suspect captured. The headline was everywhere. Emma sat in the back of Joe's diner, phone gripped so tight her knuckles went white. The article was short, just a few paragraphs, barely enough to explain how the police had rushed in, made a mistake, and ruined someone's life. The real criminal? They caught him yesterday. Some abandoned warehouse on the other side of town. No struggle, no drama. Just a quiet arrest, like nothing ever happened. Meanwhile, the man from the diner, the one Emma had fed, the one who had begged her to believe him, was already behind bars. She felt it then. Not shock, not confusion. Rage. It started in her chest, tight and burning, and spread through her limbs until she had to set her phone down before she shattered it. Her stomach twisted. He was just a homeless man, a guy with nothing but the coat on his back, and a story no one wanted to hear. And now, he was sitting in a cell for a crime he didn't commit. Emma's jaws locked. She stood up so fast, her chair scraped across the tile. Not on my watch. She didn't know how yet, didn't know where to start, or who to call, or what it would take to fix this. But one thing was clear, this story wasn't over.